So then what are the measures that you put in place to prevent you from like spiraling into becoming a problem gambler?
I'll actually say, I don't normally say this.
Oh, what? It's too spicy for the camera.
Yeah, this is new stuff. Okay, so I haven't said this to anyone before.
Welcome to Poker Life. Next question, Crispin. How do you avoid gambling at the casino as a professional poker player?
Ooh. Well, first of all, I do gamble occasionally. And this is something that I absolutely need to be self-aware about, because when you go to the casino, there's all kinds of distractions available. Okay, you can be sitting down to play poker, but the list could be super long. You have to wait an hour or more. You can get really bored. A lot of people around you having fun, and the casinos are set up so that you are more likely to gamble. I mean, that's the whole structure of a casino, is a science to try and hack into people's dopamine systems to get them to gamble. And indeed, when you start out playing poker, most people, not all, but most people who start out playing poker, they get that rush early on because it takes a while to play a million hands of poker. I mean, at this point, I have seen it all, and almost nothing can happen at the poker table that gets a big reaction out of me because it just seems so normal. Everything that happens is something we can predict. But when you first start out and you haven't seen those patterns and things are really unusual and things are new and exciting, then you can get that exhilaration of hitting the flush on the river or what have you, or getting sucked out on, or there's all these things that are very gambly about poker that takes you a while to overcome. So being self-aware that you potentially can gamble is a big part of it.
So then what are the measures that you put in place to prevent you from like spiraling into becoming a problem gambler?
You have to make deals with yourself. My strategy has been, if I... I'll actually say, I don't normally say this.
Oh, what? It's too spicy for the camera.
What I do when I go to play poker is whenever I'm at a casino where there are other forms of gambling, so obviously it doesn't apply to poker leagues and online, but when I go to the casino, I pay myself $50 every time I leave there without gambling. What does that mean? Well, if I have a bad session and I'm down a lot and I take what chips I've got left and I go past all the tables to the cage and I get the money, even if I'm down, when I get home, I will take $50 and I will put it in a special kitty that's separate from the rest of my bankroll. And that is exclusively for my personal enjoyment. Usually it goes into some kind of trip or getaway or some kind of thing that I've been looking to do for a long time. And I make sure I have it clear in my mind that that's what it's for. It's for me. It's for no bills or obligations or anything like that. Completely separate. And it gives me that thought of, oh, okay, I'm going to escape to Mauritius or whatever. So I come to the game and I sit down and I play. And then when you get home, often if you're down, if you're going, oh my goodness, I've lost 3 buy-ins, it can be really depressing. You're like, I spent all those hours. I could have been doing something productive and not lost a lot of money.
But $50.
But $50, but also when you put that $50 in that separate kitty, it's awareness that, hey, there were all these temptations. I could have tried to get even, so to speak. I could have been gambling, but I chose not to, even though I was down. And that reminds me that I'm a professional. It gives you a good feeling at the end that really alleviates the negative emotions that you get for having a big losing session or being in a downswing. And of course, that paying yourself $50 is not money that comes out of thin air. It has to come from the bankroll, but it's worth it. It's a real good affirmation.
When you first started this, did you fail a lot with the $50? Like, did you just bet on roulette or baccarat?
Interesting. Now I have to think about this. No, when I first started, I kept it up for a good few weeks. And then I had a particularly bad session. I was like, oh, screw it. And I went and I gambled. And then I actually won net gamble. I got my money back and I got home, but instead of feeling good that I had made my money back, I realized I couldn't put $50 into the kitty because I had gambled and broken my vow, kind of speak. And instead of feeling good that I had won money, which is what gamblers tend to feel, I felt bad for having been unprofessional.
Right,
in my
guilty.
approach. Guilty, sense of shame that, hang on, I'm supposed to be a professional. What does this say about me? And that's a powerful deterrent. And the other thing is about that $50 self-payment is when you do sit down at a table, you're tempted to sit down at a table, you know you're $50 in the hole, right? Because that money is not going to go to your big event thing that you've got planned out. So it's a really powerful tool, at least for me, for managing gambling behavior. And that's not because I think that I'm intrinsically a big gambler. Like if it wasn't for poker, I don't think I'd go to the casino at all. I haven't been to the casino whenever I'm not going to a live room, right? It doesn't occur to me usually. But certainly if I've had a bad session or if I'm really bored, like the tables are taking forever to open, that temptation is there. And it's available and everyone else is doing it and you're in an environment. I mean, if you go back 30 years, 40 years, everyone was smoking, not necessarily because they themselves began because they loved the idea of smoking, but because it was the social activity. You know, everyone at the factory stops and goes for a smoko. If you want to be part of that social group, well, you've got to smoke. So
Friday, Saturday night, everyone's gambling and I've got my $50, but I've got to make that choice. And I think maybe there's a psychological trick there. Like you give yourself permission to gamble, knowing that there are consequences.
yes. And people who gamble knowing they're going to lose something takes away from the enjoyment of gambling. A lot of it's the uncertainty, the anticipation of reward. And that thrill gets removed if you're like, actually, if I gamble...
That's negative EV.
It's negative. Not only is it negative EV, but there is a tangible thing that you're working towards that gets further away. And I tell you what, if you play poker every day like I did, that $50 adds up quick, right? Like if you go every single session, if you play 6 days a week, it's $300 a week that's going into a kitty specifically for something for you, right? So it doesn't take long for that money to add up. And then equally, if you gamble at the casino, you're definitely losing money in the long term. It can scare you how quickly you can lose money if you're tracking that $50 every day that you would otherwise make. It's like, oh, wow. And I think a lot of people would be much stricter about gambling if they were absolutely clear about how much money they could lose doing so. And that is something separate to being a gambler. So there are people who are compulsive gamblers because they have something they're running away from, some kind of pain, some kind of, some need, some kind of dependency. But a lot of people are gambled simply out of carelessness. It's not a big portion of their bankroll. It's not a lot of money in absolute terms. It may not be much relative to the stakes that they're playing. But just gambling a little bit will add up a lot over time. And because not many people track their gambling as much as they track, say, their poker, it's easy to miss. So, yeah, it took me a little while, I think, to recognize that. And there's certain aspects of humility. One, I'm not impervious to the temptations of gambling. I'm not some kind of robot, but I don't think that being tempted by gambling stops you from being a professional poker player. What makes you a professional isn't the absence of temptation. It's the self-awareness and recognition that
discipline.
You have this issue and having effective strategies in place to manage it. It's not just about willpower. It's about strategies and mitigation. And occasionally you can gamble, but do so in a way that you pre-planned it. That's the critical aspect of this. What makes gambling a problem for a lot of poker players is the unplanned aspect of it. They don't go to the casino intending to gamble. They go to intend to play poker. And then gambling is an unexpected consequence of busting out of a tournament early or waiting for a long time or whatever it happens to be. Or perhaps they're up a ton and they're feeling lucky and they're kind of exhilarated and they want to splash them out of it. all of this issue. I mean, one of my habits was that if I had loose change at the end of the session, and it was a denomination that I could gamble. I mean, this wasn't something that I even considered gambling. It was more like just a refund for the casino. So let's say, for example, I had some peculiar cash out number. Say, let's for argument's sake, $1,015. Well, quite likely, I wouldn't bother cashing out. I just cash out the thing, and then the 15 I would just chuck on whatever on the way out, not even really thinking about it. Not even recognizing that was gambling. You know what I mean? It was just kind of, I would see that as a convenience, loose change. So...
But that adds up.
It absolutely adds up. And it can create a kind of a circuit of behavior. You know, you win a bit and then you keep playing for a bit. It's not a good activity to do in an unplanned way. If you are planning to play roulette or planning to play baccarat or blackjack, then it becomes just entertainment, recreation, and there is nothing wrong with that. I don't have a problem with gambling as a concept. I think it's a positive thing in some ways, but it's the lack of planning and the lack of control, the lack of intention.
It makes sense. It's kind of like the habit cycle. So like there's a trigger point. For you, it was almost loose change. You have loose change. Oh, I'll spare that and gamble and cash in the rest. So, but then you've changed that trigger point. I've got $50 that I was waiting at home. If I gamble right now, that $50 is gone.
That's right. And it's really important, at least for me, to have a clear vision of what you want that money for.
Okay.
Because...
don't save for saving's sake.
Well, it wasn't the 50... There were two things about the $50 that were valuable to me psychologically. One was that feeling of coming home, remembering that I was tempted to gamble and didn't, despite perhaps whatever else had gone on that day. And despite being in an environment where that was a big thing and where that could easily happen. And so that reward wasn't the money. It was that was a ritual that reminded me that I was being a professional and behaving in a professional way. That was the first thing. The second thing is that if you have a clear vision of what you want the money for, then if you do gamble, no matter the outcome of that gamble, you've made that vision further away. If you're like, okay, and that's why I think it's good to have a big thing you want to purchase, you know, a car or a big trip or some kind of, you know, World Series main event ticket or something, whatever it is that takes a long time to build up to, then you know you're getting closer to it every session by not gambling. It's a direct reward. Whereas if you do gamble, even if you happen to win, but you can't put money aside for that particular thing, then you've actually pushed that dream, that vision, that thing you wanted to do further down the line than you otherwise would.
Have you ever cheated yourself? Have you ever paid yourself $50? Or you've been really firm?
Have I ever?
So you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to cut into myself today.
I've compromised, and this is being really raw and honest. If I sit down, so a great example would be there's a place I used to go play poker, and the lists were always really long. And that was the biggest frustration. It would be hard to tell how long you'd be waiting. And what I would do is I'd say, okay, for the first full hour, I'm not going to gamble at all. Okay. That was just like a kind of delay thing. Okay. If I'm waiting for an hour, up to an hour, that's just normal waiting time. But sometimes you're waiting forever, right? It will go on for 2 hours and 2.5 hours. And there was this kind of electronic, I don't do the poking, I don't think I've ever put money into the poking machine, electronic gaming machine, whatever they're called. But there are those kind of remote roulette spins and remote baccarat where you've got like someone on the table and it projects on a screen. Well, they had these screens right next to the poker table. So I could sit with the poker people and I could wait for the name to be called. And I would put like $5 in and bet like $1 or $1.50, right? So like really small micro amounts of money to pass the time. And that I would cheat on. I'd be like, well, that's not really gambling. I am just like, I waited for a full hour. And then when it came time to gamble, I didn't gamble more than $10 total, waiting for my seat available. And I would say that doesn't count. But, you know, it did count. It was technically, by the rules, gambling, and I shouldn't have paid myself $50. And I remember on those occasions, and probably happened 2 or 3 times, where I would come home and I'd be, look, do I really deserve the $50? Because, I did break the rule. But I felt the mental process that I went through of like, it wasn't impulsive. I actually said to myself ahead of time, wow, that list is long. I'm going to wait an hour. If it's an hour or more, I'll sit down and do this. So there was a kind of a period of time between thought and action. It wasn't impulsive, as you kind of allude to. And that's where I kind of rationalized it out. But what I should do instead is make sure I've got my own entertainment. If I come to the casino and I've got my phone, make sure that I've got some courses to watch or videos to check out, and can spend time doing things that I think are productive, not a complete waste of time while I'm waiting for my seat at the table.
Oh, that's good. Good to know. Great. I think that's everything. That's pretty comprehensive.
That's a good video, I think.
I think it's a good video. I think people will really enjoy it. So, bring it back to you guys. Do you guys gamble at the casino as a poker player? Do you have things like $50, or have you got another technique that kind of stops you from gambling? We're not saying that gambling is bad per se, but from a professional poker player point of view, it is definitely negative EV. So how do you do it? How do you manage? Let us know down below, and we'll see you next time.
Ciao for now.